I always have lighting problems at my house.
Yeah. All right, so it looks like we are live. Hello,
Hi,
everyone. So I am Nicole Magnusson, and
I'm Jaclyn Quinn. We're really excited to have this conversation tonight about some financial and planning topics.
Yeah, so we did want to share some disclaimers before we get started with everyone that we are not your personal attorneys, nor tax advisors, nor personal financial advisors. If you would like us to be, let us know. But what we say on this, you don't take that as direct personal advice.
Yes, we're happy to answer any questions, so feel free to put them in the comments and we'll try to get to them as we go on with the show.
All right, so I guess I wanted to start out with kind of what our personal stories are, why we started doing what we're doing, what we do. So I guess I'll start if that's okay, Jaclyn.
Go ahead, yeah.
So I'm a financial advisor with Point to Point Wealth Planning. It's a branch of Ameriprise. So I started out life, I grew up in a house full of love, but we didn't have a ton of money. So I understood the importance of financial literacy and financial stability very early on. I worked hard to educate myself, network with people who may be able to, serve as a resource. I connected to great role models and connected to a support system, which for me was my church. And I got involved in some activities that would help me kind of get a leg up. Fast forward to my 20s, I just turned 30, so back in my 20s, one of my friends who I knew through my church, again, that support system, was seeking an advisor for his practice. He has a growing practice of financial advisors. And he asked if I would consider joining. So I asked what it took to become an advisor, and I decided to go ahead and apply. And now, here I am. My why I decided to jump into this and completely change careers was because, it was part my upbringing, not having a ton of money, but knowing how important it was to understand money. I also it's part of my identity. I'm obviously a woman of color. There's not a lot of women of color who get into the financial industry. So I felt like it was almost a responsibility. If I had the opportunity, I should take it. And lastly, there's a larger current economic situation going on, as we all know. And I know that there's a need for people with, financial prowess, with people that can educate folks with finances and kind of guide people to get onto the right track. So that's my story and my why. And I'd love to hear what Jaclyn's is.
Yeah, and this is exactly why Nicole and I clicked from when we first met, because so much of what she said I echo. And, I grew up in a large family, middle class, very hardworking parents. And I saw from an early age how some services were just not available for the average working family. And legal services is typically one of them. A lot of times people decide to just go ahead and fight their legal battles on their own because thinking if you pick up the phone and call an attorney, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. It's a scary proposition. And, sometimes people just have to go and take their chances. So I kind of saw that growing up, too often. And I got involved with different legal services throughout high school in some civics classes. And I started doing some volunteer work. And I knew I wanted to go to law school and I wanted to be able to help people. Fast forward to now, I've had the absolute pleasure of working at the Delaware Community Reinvestment Action Council for my entire legal career thus far. So I was volunteering during law school, and it was the perfect place for me. Last July, we launched DCRAC Law, our nonprofit law firm. So we are able to provide legal services for low cost and fixed fee basis based on income and family size. So we make sure that the fees are affordable, and we do our best not to turn anyone away. So we find volunteer attorneys who can help us when we just don't have the ability to work with the client on our own. and we really take a holistic approach to working with our clients. So I love what I do, and I really love doing the estate planning piece with my clients because more often than not, they walk away saying, wow, I should have done this sooner, and now I feel so much better knowing that everything's planned and my family's going to be okay if something were to happen to me. So that's my why in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's awesome. And again, that's why we clicked, because a lot of that, I share the same values. You know, some of my clients, they leave saying, I wish I would have known this earlier. I need to tell my friends about it. You know, I didn't know you could help me with this kind of thing. Because, you know, as you know, within the legal world, there's so many different avenues to go down. It's the same with the financial world. There's so many different ways we can help you.
Yeah. And a lot of times people, you know, they might not get involved with the advisor or the attorney or whoever the professional is that they need, the accountant, until there's already a problem. And then it's more of a hassle. It might be more expensive. You know, a lot of coulda, shoulda, woulda. And that's kind of why we're doing this tonight, because, you know, hello, millennials, we're getting older. It's time to work on our planning and get everything in order.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. So I know that, you know, people hear financial advisor, people hear attorney, they have these ideas of what we do. But I wanted to dig into what it is that, you know, our practices do actually, and what our roles are, you know, what our costs are, what our structure is. So if you'd like, you can go ahead and start, since you already kind of gave a precursor to DCRAC. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. So DCRAC's nonprofit law firm, like I mentioned, we started it last year. We actually have a schedule of fees listed on our website. So if someone says, you know, they're interested in doing their will, they can look on the website and figure out how much it would cost based on their family size and monthly income. And that alone is a breath of fresh air in the legal field, because often we don't know what the attorney is going to charge prior to calling. So, and that being said, we do try to work with everyone. So I come from a unique perspective where we're not really boxing people out due to inability to pay, but we do charge these fees, and we hope to, you know, be able to support our programs with our fees. So we have that listed on our website. For the most part, someone who comes in to do their estate planning, it consists of 3 main documents. That would be their will, their power of attorney, and their healthcare directive. And that could cost anywhere from $350 is our market rate, all the way down to you know, no cost, or $100 for very low income individuals. So that is a range of pricing, and the services might change based on what types of assets someone owns and the complexity of the issues that come up. For people who maybe are caring for a disabled family member or child, or have certain circumstances which might require a trust, there are, you know, additional services that would be provided in that case, or at least recommended. For the most part, you know, we're able, after we have an initial conversation, we can kind of figure out what the scope of the service is, so that it's not a surprise at the end, you know, oh, we've been meeting and it's been nice talking to you, you owe us $1,200. That's not how it works, and we're very mindful of that. So we do our best to keep our fees as reasonable as possible. And then typically, you know, how we get paid. So our clients would pay us directly. You know, the attorney-client relationship is unique, and, you know, just as it is with a financial advisor, but we do have a duty to our clients, and we take that extremely, you know, very seriously, of course. Sometimes, you know, if siblings are working on their planning together and one person is better off and they want to pay to have their brother do their will, you know, we've seen all types of situations. And, you know, in that case, the duty still is to the client, but you are able to get that assistance in paying for the services if needed.
Great, yeah. And we share that same kind of almost fiduciary responsibility. So it's whatever's in the client's best interest, and we uphold that standard across our practice as well.
Yeah, Nicole, how do you get paid?
So I get paid in a couple different ways, and it depends on, again, the complexity of the case. We have a range of fees. We have what's called a foundational level of advice that we provide. That's actually complimentary, and that's for kind of talking once a year to give you a snapshot of your financial picture, where you're at. And we focus on the goal of retirement. I know a lot of millennials don't think about retirement, but if you start planning now, it will be a much better picture in the future. So we kind of focus on retirement. So that's our complimentary service. And again, there's not a deep dive into tax strategies or estate planning. But we also do a more comprehensive level of advice, and we have a few levels of that. And again, the complexity comes into play. People that are fresh out of college, got their first job, want to know about the benefits that their employer is offering and get set up with maybe an IRA. That level starts out at about $100 a month, and it goes up to about $215 a month for executives and people with stock options and restricted stock options, things like that. So we have a range of fees. And I get paid. Those fees are annual advice-based fees. So the recommendations we provide, the research we do, that's what you're paying for there. We also, if you have assets with us, have products that we offer you. And all of this is disclosed upfront before any commitments are made. But there are commissions. So if you buy a mutual fund within an IRA, if you open an insurance policy with us, life insurance, long-term care, disability insurance, there's compensation that I would get from that. So that's how I get paid there. And people pay, they can pay monthly, quarterly, annually. They can pay from their assets. There's lots of different ways we get paid. There are also plan gifts that some parents do for kids, which is awesome. And some grandparents do it as well. They want to get their kids started on the right foot. So they donate a financial plan to their child. So about $1,200 to $1,600 a year. They'll donate that to us. And about my practice as a whole, we have a small team. We have 7 advisors and 3 staff. And we all have kind of different expertise and different focuses. So we have an insurance specialist. We have a disability insurance specialist. We have a planning specialist. We have a retirement specialist that also specializes in expats and overseas clients, and so on and so forth. So we are kind of a catch-all practice, but we are holistic. We look at a whole picture of a person. Similar to what Jaclyn was saying, you take into account all the different aspects of the person, you look at the complexity, and we go from there. And we try to be as fair as possible. If someone's not ready to plan with us and not ready to pay those fees, we let them know that, but we also give them some tips and pointers to get to the point where they can start paying for the more comprehensive advice.
Yeah. At DCRAC Law, I failed to mention, so, I did say we're a nonprofit law firm. So we do try to raise grant funds that could help cover and support our legal offerings. One of the programs that we've run for a long time now is the Low Income Tax Clinic. So we can represent people with tax controversies here in Delaware and actually, throughout the U.S. So with the tax court, we don't have the same restrictions like we do, in terms of the state bars. So we've had clients from Nebraska because they didn't have a LITC in their state. So that's a really unique aspect of what we do. And our team is pretty small. We have 3 attorneys and 1 outreach specialist. And then we have a lot of volunteers that we work with. So our volunteers they range from attorneys, paralegals, student interns, and they really help things move forward.
Awesome. That tax clinic must be hugely successful. I know
very busy.
Taxes, especially now with COVID and all the legislation that's changed there, the taxes have gotten more and more complicated. Though it was supposed to be a simplification, they get more complicated, and there has to be more and more thought put into how people are thinking about taxes. So that's an awesome service to provide. So you do tax help. You do, wills and powers of attorney. What else do you do with DCRAC? Kind of walk us through maybe an example of a case that you might see on a normal day.
Yeah, so at DCRAC, we really have three distinct institutions. We have the nonprofit law firm, and then we also have the money school and our Stepping Stones Community Federal Credit Union. So
awesome.
We're educating on finances. We have the credit union to bank the unbanked and underserved, those who might be using prepaid cards or different services that are very expensive and not really in the best interest of someone to build credit and really gain financial stability. So, our services range there, and we're always adding new services at Stepping Stones, which has just been amazing. We were a PPP lender, so
nice.
Even during the pandemic was great. So the Money School has free financial classes. We have a lot of volunteers who teach those, and classes range from basic credit, budgeting, all the way to planning taxes in retirement. There's one coming up soon about investing, and we have classes about probate and estate planning. So we really do have quite a range there. Even Medicaid basics, understanding that, a lot of complex topics.
That's awesome. So, I might have to change the investing one.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of our clients are, typically lower income, typically finding themselves in some type of hardship that is requiring them to talk to a lawyer, maybe get a loan, maybe rethink how they're banking and managing finances altogether. So, sometimes a client might come in and they have a loan that went bad and maybe attempting to refinance didn't work out, could have cost them a lot of money and failed. So we try to get them back, in the swing of things, try to get them back on track financially, see, was this a scam? Were they taken advantage of in some way? So, if someone was victimized or if there's a clear indication of fraud, we make sure that we take action to correct that. With our tax clinic, we do have a lot of small business owners who find themselves with some tax issues. So, maybe they weren't making estimated payments, and then that tax bill came and hit them in the face at the end of the year when they filed. Yeah. In that case, we try to work through that large bill, but then also set them up for success for the following year.
Awesome.
And then with the estate planning, we do work with a lot of people who inherited, mostly a house. So, grandma passed away, she had a mortgage, she left she left this house, and maybe one grandchild was living there. And now, because she didn't have a will, the house is really left to several of her family members. So maybe, her daughter, her son, and 2 grandchildren from a deceased child. And we need to work with the whole family in order to allow the person who's living there and, who maybe she wanted the house to stay with that person, and we need to formalize that. And these things take a lot of time, and we have to jump through a lot of hurdles to make it happen for them successfully. So with the planning, we find that it's just as important, or sometimes more important, for the lower income families and in precarious financial situations to do their planning, so that it's not going to leave someone homeless without options. And, sometimes there's no real good solution to save the property. So doing that planning is just highly important. And a lot of people think, I don't have enough money, or my family gets along, I don't need to go through all of that, everyone knows what to do. That's fine, but the law does dictate what happens with your assets if you pass away without a will. So if you pass away without a will, it's called intestate. So there is an intestacy statute which dictates the succession of your assets. And it's fine for someone to say, if a family member doesn't want to inherit, they can waive their right, but we still have to give them that option. So it does take a lot of time, and people change their minds when they see dollar signs. Yes. So it becomes really important to do planning in advance.
Yes, and we see the same thing on our end. Even with very wealthy clients, like you said, when people see dollar signs, their complete demeanor changes. They could be the best of siblings, and mom passes away and leaves a $2 million estate. Now they're worst enemies, and we've had clients come in screaming because they weren't willing to talk about it. It's a tough thing to talk about, estate planning, talking about wills, talking about long-term care for parents and things like that. It's hard to talk about because it's it's the inevitable death. So they come in after the fact with no knowledge about how it works, and then they get hit with all this information and they're overwhelmed. They're already grieving, and planning is paramount to preventing all of that. We try to bring families in if we have a client, especially with a larger estate, when we know there will be issues, tax issues, inheritance issues, the large inheritances, and with different states, there are different taxes on your estate. So, Florida is not a good place to pass away in because they have a large death tax, we call it. Pennsylvania is the same. It has, a larger tax at death. But, we try to look at that. We try to bring families in, talk to them about the options, different buckets to put money into to protect against estate issues. We talk about that with families, and we let them just ask questions if they don't understand what life insurance is for or how it works when their parent passes away. We go ahead and go through that whole situation. We have lots of reports we run to show them how everything would work if this happens, if that happens, and it clears up a lot of the worry. And once the inevitable does happen, they've already planned for it. They're already comfortable with what the outcome will be. And it really helps smooth things over and keep families, together and happy.
Right. I always say it's like when you carry an umbrella. You do your planning and don't worry, it won't rain, right? At least that's how it works for me. So it's not like if you do this planning, you're going to walk out and get struck by lightning. I mean, this is inevitable. It's time to start thinking about it. And Jen just asked, as a millennial, what's the first thing I should do? And that's a great question. So exactly what we're going to talk about right now. So the first thing, so thinking about these 3 documents I mentioned, doing the will, the advanced directive for healthcare, and the durable power of attorney. So a will is really important for several reasons. For one, you choose an executor who you trust to manage all of your assets in the event you pass away. So, often if you're married, it's your spouse, it could be a sibling, it could be a friend. It really could be anyone that you trust. It doesn't have to be a certain person in your life. But in thinking about preparing that will, you want to think about if you have kids. In your will, you can appoint guardians. It's taken, as it's very strong evidence in support of those guardians that you appoint in your will. So you definitely want to do that. You want to mention, who would you want to leave your real estate to? So if you do own property, you can leave that to someone in your will, and that avoids a lot of headache and probate for that particular piece of property. In your will, you mention where your tangible items will be left to. So you can leave items to individuals. You can leave it to, a class of beneficiaries. So if you have children, you can say, I leave all of my items to my children in equal shares, and they can divide as they see fit. Mm-hmm. Most importantly, though, in preparing a will, we have to talk about all of the accounts that you might have with your financial advisor to make sure that your beneficiaries are all set up and in order. Because the will is really a bag or a basket where all of the leftover things have to pass. And with those things passing upon your death, that's the probate process. So when we talk about probate, it's really a matter of making sure that everything you owned when you passed away, which is what becomes your estate, is divided and gets in the hands of the right people. So in that process, if you have an account that doesn't have a beneficiary, it must go through probate, which means, it goes through the Register of Wills office and we make sure it gets to the right people, but it could take a while. So if there are fees or anything, claim against the estate for some reason, that has to be paid first before it can be distributed. So, if you have a beneficiary, it passes right to the beneficiary through that vehicle. So, Nicole can talk a little more about that with how she sees the beneficiaries set up with her clients.
Yes. So on all of our accounts, whether it's a brokerage account, a life insurance policy, we make sure to have beneficiaries for every client on every account. And some clients have a charity for every account they have. They might have 13 accounts, and for every account they have DCRAC, they have Spur Impact, they have different ones, and they can split it up however they want. If you have 4 kids, you can do 25% to each kid. If you have a favorite kid, you can do 75% to them. But you outline it, and we make sure that people name by name their children as well, because there's a big part of naming beneficiaries and doing wills as well. A lot of people leave it with the default language, which is living lawful children. Living lawful children is only your children. So my example is, I'm married. My husband has a son he adopted in a previous marriage. He is my stepson. He is not my legal lawful child. So if I were to say, I'll leave my estate to my legal lawful children, and it was my account in name, he wouldn't get anything. He would be disinherited. So there's lots of different things to look at when you're naming beneficiaries. And when you have blended marriages, when you have blended families, you need to think about those kind of things. Foster youth, adoptive youth, I'm a big advocate for them. They need to know about it too, because they don't want to be disinherited. So we make sure to name beneficiaries by name so that there's no disinheriting. We make sure to specify what account goes to what person, and it ends up much smoother. And it also engages the beneficiaries in conversation to say, hey, this might be coming your way. This is something to think about, and how are your accounts set up? So we also talk to the beneficiaries about how their accounts are set up to make sure that everybody's covered.
Yeah. So that's really the first step, to think about, what do you have and how would you want it to be divided among your family members, among your loved ones. That final gift we make is the biggest gift, and we agonize over birthday gifts and Christmas gifts, but it's really important to think through, how can this be easiest, most efficient, paying less fees, and just making sure that your loved ones can benefit from your assets in the event you pass away as best as possible. So the first step is just getting in that mindset.
Yeah. In addition, I wanted to add that if you have any employer benefits, if you have a 401k, a 403b, those accounts count. So you need to have a beneficiary listed for those as well. Most of us do work in businesses with, a 403b or access to an IRA. Those need beneficiaries too. And if something changes in your life, if you get married or if you have a child, you need to update those. Whenever you have a life event, those need to be dated so that, again, there's no unintentional disinheriting of your assets.
Right. Planning, being as specific as possible, and thoroughly going through all of the accounts is such an important piece in preparing a will and working on your financial plan.
Yes.
So when we convene next week, we'll be here at the same time, same place. We're going to talk about some more specifics when it comes to all of these documents and in financial planning.
Yeah, we're going to talk about, different principles of financial planning, steps that millennials can take. I'll go through a checklist, and we'll go through some of the topics that are, top of mind, like student loans, things like that.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So thank you for joining us.
Yes. And thank you for your questions.